Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnick. Today, we have the honor of hearing from a true trailblazer, a man who has not only defied odds, but redefined what it means to lead with purpose and vision. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dev Pragad. He's the CEO and co-owner of the iconic Newsweek magazine, which I grew up with. It was standard fodder in our house in the 70s. Dev is more than just a media executive. He's a change maker, a thought leader, and a shining example of resilience. He took the reins of Newsweek at a critical juncture, navigating its transformation from a traditional print publication into a thriving digital powerhouse with a global audience of 100 million, more or less. But Dev's impact goes beyond numbers. He has instilled a culture of purpose-driven journalism at Newsweek, one that tackles the environment in which we live today. Under his leadership, Newsweek has become a catalyst for action, influencing businesses, informing governments and communities worldwide. His journey exemplifies the very essence of the caring economy, in my opinion: leadership driven by values, compassion, and a commitment to a better future. Dev is a Harvard Business School alumnus. He's an entrepreneur, a fellow at King's College London, and he embodies lifelong learning and believes in empowering others, particularly his team members, to lead alongside him. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome my friend and colleague, Dev Pragad, to the Caring Economy.
Hi, Toby. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very flattering introduction.
Well, it's much deserved. I met you through my work at the British Consulate. I think we clicked from the start. As I said at the start, I grew up with Newsweek. That was the magazine of choice in our house. So I have great respect for it, and I'm loving what you're doing with it. But as we always start, Dev, would you give us maybe a 2-3 minute overview of your life, where you're born, maybe how you found your way, how you got where you got?
I was born in southern India, in a city called Coimbatore, which not many people know. The capital city of the state is Chennai or Madras, which most people know. My parents left India when I was 11 years old. They moved briefly to a Middle Eastern country called Bahrain. And thereafter, they moved to London in the UK, so which is where I spent most of my life. I did my undergrad in computer science and computer networks. I followed that up with a PhD, doing deep research in computer networks, which is really internet. Right? So this was in the mid-2000s when broadband had just, come out. Pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone era, we were working on, pretty amazing research and tech that made us see that the bandwidth that we are so used to, the internet bandwidth, which was not common at that time, we were really working on those things, right? So we could see how that's going to transform the world. The end of it, I had the opportunity to remain in academia and become a professor and a researcher. But I had enough of it. Parents were very supportive of me all throughout, and I stayed with them at that point. So I saved up all my scholarship money. I was a very good student, so I won a lot of scholarship. All my education was funded. I had a living stipend.
Awesome.
So at that point, I had an opportunity to kind of help launch a company called IBT Media in the UK. It was a complete digital startup. So I thought I'll give it a shot and see what happens. I obviously didn't take any pay. I funded myself with the savings I had. We started with about 3 people very quickly. This was during the financial crisis of 2008, 2010. But digital media was still growing in double digit, right? So it was the tide was high, so all boats, rose with it. And it was then, I got into Newsweek because this company in the US bought Newsweek when Newsweek was perhaps at one of its lowest points, right? It had just been sold for $1, purchased by 2 billionaires, Sidney Harman and Barry Diller. And Sidney Harman unfortunately passed away due to cancer of old age. He was 92. And within 2 years, it was sold again to IBT Media. It was just a handful of people. During the heydays, it had hundreds and hundreds of people. It did not have a website. It did not have a print. And IBT Media managed it for a while. I ran their international office and the international version of Newsweek. And in 2016, the business in the US was not in a good shape. It was facing a lot of financial and legal issues. So the CEO at that point asked if I'd want to come here and become the CEO of the company. It was a burning ship. Um, and my initial reaction was probably no. But very quickly I realized, my business in the US would go under if this ship goes under. So I said, let me give it a shot and see what happens, right? Things actually got worse after I came here, which is when, due to a variety of legal issues the previous company was facing, we had to spin off Newsweek into its own standalone company, which is when I became a part owner, right? Since then, we put Newsweek into quite a robust digital first strategy. And the business has absolutely thrived. But, in this journey, there's been a lot of amazing people who have helped me, opened doors, supported me, advised me, and that's probably why I'm here.
Turning it around as you have is admirable, to say the least. I wonder if there are some key lessons perhaps you learned while navigating that major corporate turnaround, because it's not for the faint of heart. But you seem calm, cool, and collected now, and you made that turnaround. So share us some insights.
I was recently talking to someone, and they made the same observation. I'm always very calm and composed. And I think, that may be my superpower. Recently I was listening to this video clip by the CEO of NVIDIA. And he was really talking about how painful his journey was. Obviously, that's a company of a different magnitude. And he said the most important thing is resilience. And you can't build resilience unless you go through a lot of difficulty and suffering. And I think he was talking to a bunch of Stanford graduates. And he said, I really wish you all a lot of pain and a lot of suffering so you can build resilience. I think I was always a very resilient person. And I love a good challenge. I sometimes talk about this. I went straight from an undergrad to a PhD. And the story was a little funny because when my undergrad thesis project list was out, I looked at it and they all looked a little too easy. So I go to, one of the guys at the research center working on computer networks, and I tell him, hey, look, I looked at all the topics. They all look a little easy. Is there any way you could give me a much more challenging project? And he threw me out, that I was a little crazy. So I went back to him again, and he actually gave me a master's project for my undergrad. He said there are only two outcomes. Either you're going to fail miserably. If so, it's your problem, or you're going to do really well. I can't see anywhere in between. So I did it. It went really well. I actually published a paper on it. I won a few awards for it. That's how I actually went from an undergrad to a PhD when I was 21. So I always loved a interesting challenge. That's really was part of who I was. And Newsweek definitely was a big challenge, right? I saw a huge opportunity, what we can do with Newsweek, but it was mismanaged for nearly a decade, close to a decade by the time, for various reasons, right? I think it's not so much about pointing fingers. We all make mistakes, circumstances change and issues happen, and ownerships had changed, but it was not an easy job. There was tons of debt, tons of bad press, and a lot of people were anxious about partnering with us and working with us. So how do you navigate through that, right? Once you see that as an opportunity, then you just have to really hunker down, get a great team together. Everything I have accomplished is really through the amazing work of my team. Without them, I really would be nothing. All I did was pull them together, give them a good vision, and be the cohesive force that held the unit together through all of this. So resilience is a huge part in succeeding in anything, right? If success was easy, everyone would be super successful, right? So at some point, we all had to work incredibly hard, make a lot of sacrifices. I've made a lot of sacrifices. There was a period of time I had no fun, no hobby, no nothing. I worked 12, 14, 18 hours a day, weekends, you name it, right? I was always working. I missed, as a result, some of my older kids growing up. I don't have a lot of memories of that, even though I was with them. I was mentally absent.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a price you really have to pay. So that's one. After that, I'm a big believer in setting big, ambitious goals. Not crazy goals. Well, sometimes big, ambitious goals can look crazy. Crazy is a subjective term, right?
Yes.
Um, when I took over Newsweek, I kind of set a big goal that after analyzing what Newsweek was historically, right, it was a widely read publication. So I told my team, uh, we kind of have to rebuild and recreate what Newsweek was at that time. And it was a very influential publication. We're still working on it, but it was also a widely read publication. So I set a goal of 100 million uniques when we were about 5 or 6 million uniques a month. A lot of people laughed at us. But that set the business in a trajectory that was pretty impressive, right? Later on, I spent a bit of time at Harvard Business School studying, and I read some literature that said teams and companies that always set ambitious goals, big ambitious goals, always outperform teams that do not, right? And this is proven by a lot of research. I did not know that. And I found that very impressive. I was very, inspired by that. So that plays
I'm smiling as you say that, because I know I did a certificate program at Harvard Business School, but I think they're the ones famous for coining the expression BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's overused, I think, by MBAs, but it's kind of what you're describing here, right? Like you set those big goals, you're more likely to achieve them, right?
So at Harvard Business School, they define entrepreneurship as the relentless pursuit of an opportunity without regard to resource currently controlled. So if you really look at great entrepreneurs, they're able to create something when most people are like, no, that's not possible, or that's too difficult or impossible. We found a lot of inspiration in all of these things in how we went about turning Newsweek around. And finally, setting big, ambitious goals is not enough, right? That alone is just wishful thinking or daydreaming. You got to follow that up with execution, right? With excellence in execution. I would rather take a very average idea that's executed perfectly than a brilliant idea that's hardly executed or very poorly executed. So I think sometimes we get too consumed by chasing a beautiful idea, an amazing idea, a big idea, and get too fascinated about how awesome it is. But we forget the importance of excellence in operation and excellence in execution, because success is often really defined by how well you're able to execute something, right? And if you analyze many businesses, they often fail. Some people make strategic choices, but very competent businesses often get that right. But it's either due to culture issues or other issues, they fail in executing really, really well. So I would say for me, those would be those three big things.
Yeah. I'm smiling. Yesterday I interviewed, it hasn't aired yet, but Lord Rami Ranger, who you might know in the House of Lords, and he is Indian descent as well, but he started out, his first job really when in the UK was waxing cars, because when they were shipped, they had wax and he'd keep them sort of tidy, and then he would be unwaxing them in a sense. But he said, any job is noteworthy or important, and you just want to be the best at it. So it's that same kind of execution you're talking about, no matter what the job is, right? And you want to just go for it.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about the journalism piece though? Because here you are, you trained in computer science, you are an academician. I actually was PhD track at Columbia, went all the way through, got my MPhil, started the dissertation research, and then I just had to get out. It sounds like you went all the way and then had to get out, but I can empathize with where you were, I think. Like there's a whole world out there, and it's faster paced in the private sector. Would you say, or is that more your take or your liking?
It's really hard to say. There are a lot of people or scientists, I still know many of them, who do amazing stuff, right? And thanks to the hard work, new solutions are invented, new drugs are invented.
Yeah.
And these people are often not paid well, but they do it just because they just love it. And it's also a lot of hard work. You spend countless hours in a lab or in an office just studying and working. So, I do hold those people with a lot of respect. It's also rewarding when you're out in the industry, out in the world, building things, right? One of the criticisms of academia is that it's too much theory. and they're not spending enough time executing and making things happen. Good or bad, I've had a good run.
Ladies and gentlemen, again today on The Caring Economy, I'm really thrilled to have Dr. Dev Pragad with us. He is the CEO and co-owner of the fantastic Newsweek magazine, a staple in my family throughout my life. Dev, when we're going from academia and computer science, you went into an entrepreneurial space, but more specifically went into journalism. Can you talk a little bit about why you were drawn to journalism, or how you think of journalism, or was it just chance?
I would say it was mostly chance, but I was fascinated by this because it's also digital media. We run on top of the digital infrastructure today. Once upon a time, it was the print infrastructure that carried publications. Today, it's digital. And tomorrow, it might be AI, some flavor of AI through which people consume information, right? So the way technology disrupts everything is pretty fascinating, right? And I think, working in a field where technology is applied is very interesting and very fascinating. But of course, journalism is a very unique and interesting field. One led to the other, and I ended up working with journalists in one shape or form since 2008 and 2009. Which is quite a bit of time now. I used to think once upon a time I was a young person in the business. Not anymore. I've been involved in Newsweek since 2014, nearly 10 years now. During the transformation of Newsweek, obviously this podcast is called the Caring Economy, and purpose plays a big part in it. The big part of the transformation also involved in us becoming a more mission-driven organization. Rather than quest for just audience or readership, we wanted to govern ourselves with a clear sense of purpose and a mission. So when I took over Newsweek, it, for whatever reason, had become a very, very left-wing publication. There's nothing wrong per se, but when I did go back in history and spent a lot of time studying Newsweek, it was a publication that people across America had a relationship with, right? It tried not to be extremely polarizing. It tried to be, accessible to people across the cultural and political spectrum. So after spending a lot of time analyzing that together with my editor-in-chief, Nancy Cooper, and Nancy's story is also very interesting because she graduated from Harvard undergrad, and Newsweek was her first job in the 80s. She joined the letters department, worked her way up, and today she's the editor-in-chief. So we worked on a new mission statement, and the first part of the mission statement is Newsweek speaks to and listens to people across the political and cultural spectrum. And we also want to be a fair and an accessible publication without taking sides. So that kind of became the rallying cry for us in building our audience, building our content.
I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the measurement of your business and the impact above and beyond the traditional metrics like readership and profitability, but how else are you pulse taking or sort of measuring that you got this right and you and Nancy are rocking it, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most businesses are very good at measuring themselves, right? In fact, if you look at very high performing tech businesses, they measure everything. In Silicon Valley, it was Intel that first invented OKRs, and almost every Silicon Valley company started to use OKRs, right? There's a book by John Doerr who kind of made OKRs famous, and the book is titled Measure What Matters, right? Unless you're able to measure what matters, you really don't build your company. And I think in journalism, the only thing people are measuring is how many readers you get. And in the pursuit of that, I think you may end up slanting yourself one way or the other just because you get your numbers, right? For us, in order to govern that, that's why we came up with our mission statement. But then how do you validate that, right? Which is really the question that you are asking. And as we looked into it, there was not a lot of resources on how to go about it. If that leads to a complete disruption in the news business and news publishers are not able to sustain themselves, then how's AI going to summarize news? Who's going to produce news for it to summarize, right? So it really has to be some sort of a symbiotic ecosystem. And the anxiety is, how do you make sure that's done fairly? Because one thing we know is tech companies raise a lot of capital, and the single objective is to build products at scale and make a lot of money.
Mhm.
and return the investment plus 10 times that to their investors, right? So they're not going to be thinking about how do we take care of news publishers or make it fair and so on. Is it regulation that's going to help? Or is it litigation that's going to help? Or is it going to be
Both,
common
yeah,
sense that's going to
yeah.
help? We really don't know. I was talking to an AI expert, and he said something really interesting. Today AI tools come in and they scan and read all the amazing things humans have produced and created, right? Whether it's videos, images, text, and everything. And then AI starts to create things. But if AI starts to create things and publishes it, then the next version of AI is going to be reading and learning from material that was produced by AI. So at what point, what really happens, right? Where is really human creativity? Where is really creativity coming? Or is AI going to become so creative by itself? It's able to figure things out and create completely new things by itself, right? And at least in his model, he was saying once that tips 20 to 30% of machines, ingesting content created by themselves, then at least his model will start to have issues.
Yeah, it'll collapse. You hear about data collapse. You also hear about data destiny, because if you need significant amounts of data to make this AI really be helpful, objective, inclusive. I mean, I'm loving all the books coming out about it, but still, warts and all, I think we need to embrace it. I'm glad to hear you are with the team.
I always like to go against the conventional wisdom. I don't like to just follow where the group thinking is going, and I think for me that's worked out really well. Of course, you have to apply a lot of common sense, right? Humans do a lot of things for a reason. You don't challenge a lot of things, but as you're exploring opportunities, if everyone's going down a particular way, then how are you going to find a big opportunity going down that path, right? It's always worth challenging assumptions, because if you don't challenge them, you just go down a path, and sometimes you don't even know why you're there. Re-examining a lot of assumptions is also very helpful, and it's always good to think outside the box. For me, they've worked incredibly well.
Really well said. The old expression, assume makes an ass of you and me. So you do want to do that in a civil, polite way and be critical. So I think your wisdom is shown through. You had a great career. I can't wait to see what the next 10 years are going to mean for Newsweek and for you. I hope you'll come back and keep on talking about the future.
Nice. We should probably do one in like 4 years from now and see what's happened, right? Either AI would have completely destroyed our business,
or even sooner.
I think it's probably going to be a binary option.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. You never know. It's exciting. I think the society overall will benefit, and I think the call is for all of us to be agile, nimble, and evolve with the times.
And curious. Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhatt, CEO and co-owner of Newsweek magazine. Really grateful for your time today.
Thanks, Toby. Really appreciate this.